Good evening and welcome to another edition of Auburn Reports from practice of the preseason here from AL.com. James Crepea and Brandon Marcello with you. Obviously this evening, well, we've had fun this week, Brandon. This evening is a little bit more serious in that Duke Williams not present at tonight's practice for unexplained personal reasons, and there is no timetable for his return. So we spoke with Rhett Lashley about it. What are your impressions from what Rhett had to say about this uncertain situation right now?
Well, it's the first time when something has come up with Duke, and because this isn't the first time, obviously, where he's missed practice. There's just been questions about his status with the team. But Rhett saying that I'm here, if you guys are ready to start talking about the other players that are out there, I'm ready. That's a paraphrase. So I don't know if that was frustration, but he wanted to move on because of the situation, obviously, with Duke, which we don't know what that centers around. We know Duke was on campus earlier today, but that's about it. He just did not come out to practice. They're saying it's personal business. But James, not the first time something similar like this has happened. He had the suspension at the Outback Bowl, and in the weeks leading up to that, there was issues with him not being at practice. And Gus Malzahn said at the time that it was because he was sick, and then he ended up being suspended for the Outback Bowl. And then back in May, there was another issue that came up. Yeah,
when he sent out the series of tweets, which you and I and a couple other people saw, and many fans saw, that were quickly deleted later that evening, but insinuating that he was not happy here at Auburn, that he was going to consider his options for where to go after final exams back in May. And then those were all deleted, and it was treated the next day as what was tried to be dismissed and tried to put the brush fire out, proverbially speaking. Damian Craig meeting with Duke in this meeting room, tweeting out a picture of the two of them all smiles with the caption, "Everything Gucci." And then we didn't speak to anybody until we spoke to Gus. That was a Wednesday night.
Yep.
Damian followed up on Thursday. We spoke to Gus on Monday.
Yeah.
And Gus was just saying, hey, look, we got to do a better job with what we tweet out. We understand that. And that was basically it. And I asked him, so there's no concern whatsoever that Duke will be here in the fall? And the answer was very simply no. Well, no, he showed up to start preseason practice, trying to get through it. But here we are, only on day 4. We're not even in full pads yet. And the #1 wide receiver on this team, and possibly the #1 wide receiver in the country, who has had these issues in the past, once again has some sort of other off-the-field issue. And I asked Rhett, is this growing frustration now that these things keep occurring? For someone who was lauded by Rhett, by Damian, and by Gus and teammates as being more mature now, is this growing frustration? I think even though Rhett said no, and that there's always obvious other circumstances that they've dealt with Duke and others, I think the answer has to be a little bit of yes. How can it be?
We also don't know what Duke's been dealing with or what he's dealing with right now, so it's kind of hard to comment and kind of put it all into a nice, tidy box and say, well, this is what's going on. So it makes it more difficult from that standpoint. And
it's very hard to, you can't criticize and be objective and fair about it because you don't know what the young man's going through. But again, this was not treated like Trey Matthews at the beginning of the week from Gus, where it was personal matter, he'll be back tomorrow. That was very much a, hey, no problem. And it was no cause for concern, really. Now, we don't know exactly what happened there, but ultimately Trey Matthews is back at practice and seems to be no big deal. This was personal business, day-to-day, we'll see. Yeah, I'd love to talk about who's here. It's a very different tone there. So, no, we can't. You have to read between the lines, and it becomes reading tea leaves when you don't know the specifics. And as I say, I think without knowing some of it, there has to be naturally some source of frustration there. But for those who were here, we certainly spoke to Rhett a little bit about the running backs. We both wrote extensively about the running backs today, having spoken with Rhett and Tim Horton. You wrote about Rock Thomas, and you wrote about Kerryon Johnson. Start off with Rock and what we heard from Tim, because I think there was some phenomenal quotes in that story and a great conversation we had with Tim.
Yeah, Rock is a player that his big question is, can he be an every down back? Can he carry the ball 20 times or more? He hadn't done it since high school. And when you look at him and the way he runs, his running style opens him up for big hits. He just runs, I mean, he's a great runner, but his spin move and everything he does in the middle of the field, he gets hit a lot. And you even looked at the scrimmage in the spring, the Mississippi State game last season, he took some big hits. You can't do that and be a 20 carry back in the SEC. So he's tried to refine that, become a better runner. But I found it was interesting that Rhett Lashley even today was saying that he's a guy that's really stood out. He's much more confident. And Tim Horton's questions, which still are left to be answered when they start putting those pads on, is can he be that every down back? Because as Tim Horton said, he's about to get the crap knocked out of him, is what he said.
Yeah.
And we've seen it here and there, tastes of it. And now in these scrimmages, I'm sure they're putting him in situations where they go, this is a power play, don't bounce it outside.
Right.
Run between the tackles, show us what you can do. Kerryon Johnson, newcomer, freshman, speedy guy, set a record in this stadium right behind us, the state championship game with Madison Academy, had 4 touchdowns on 8 carries. He's kind of more of a wildcat guy, could be in the slot. Tim Horton said that all along, ever since April, and the coaches really like him. And I think the number one thing that's going to get him on the field, he's got the natural athleticism, but everybody keeps saying he's really smart, and he can read defenses, and he knows what's coming, and he's got a really good grasp on the playbook. If that's the case, I think you'll see him sooner than later on the field.
Brings a little bit of a different skill set, too, to the dynamic of Rock, very much a dynamic playmaker. Javon Robinson, who I got to write about today, much more of a powerful guy.
Yeah.
Clearly the front runner to be the third down back, third and short like Cap and Trey the last 2 years. You saw them just automatically convert 3rd and 3 or less. Javon seems to be that guy. And Peyton Barber, who's probably more of the all-around guy, believes he is, and he probably is. If you had to say who's the second most in line for third down back, who's the second most in line for dynamic playmaker, it's probably Peyton Barber and all those things.
Yep.
But Kerryon just brings a little bit of a different skill set and a little bit different than all 3 of those guys, and probably offers himself an opportunity to see the field in a different capacity, like Wildcat, like we discussed before. So it'll be interesting to see with those, but for sure, the running back competition at the moment is the most important one on the offense, so we definitely check out that on AL.com and check out more tomorrow, as we'll hear from Gus Malzahn and some additional players, and hopefully get some additional updates about Haquille Williams. For James Crepea and Brandon Marcello, signing off.